Very busy show today. Dame Andrea Jenkins, her most honest interview ever, talking about the challenges of her political and private life and why she backs Nigel Farage. Plus, former Tory MP Mark Jenkinson on why the Conservatives are still in with a shout at the next election. But we start with my hot take. Lovely to see you. I hope all is well. Now, I'll be honest, there have been times when Britain has needed a Labour government. Perhaps after the war with the foundation of the NHS, Harold Wilson's support of the white heater technology in the 1960s and rapid house building, plus Tony Blair's investment in the public sector in the 2010s. But if ever there was a time not to have a Labour government, it is now. Now, I'm no expert on economic history, but given that the country is in the grip of a union power stranglehold, with a bloated welfare state, inflation stubbornly high, eye-watering debt, and the cost of government borrowing ever more costly, I would humbly suggest that socialism is not the answer. Sir Keir Starmer, who is a master of Orwellian doublespeak, trumpeted this new administration as being focused on growth. Well, how's that working out for him, given that growth at the start of the year was 0.7%, the highest in the G7, and even 0.5% in July under Rishi Sunak, still beating America, Japan and Germany. Where is it now? Well, it now sits at a measly 0.1%, with the United Kingdom flirting with recession in a way that Prince Andrew flirts at a Girls Aloud concert. If this government is all about growth, then frankly, Paul Gascoigne is all about a quiet night in. Look, I'm a great believer in some left-wing ideas. Free healthcare, free education, a welfare state which protects those unable to work or put a roof over their head. But in recent years, ironically under the so-called Conservatives, Britain has adopted socialism by stealth, with up to 5 million working-age adults not active in the economy, and a generation dependent on handouts while you and I get up in the morning and go to work. We've got people off work for months on end on full pay for stress and so-called mental health issues. What happened to resilience? Plus, taxes have gone through the roof as public services get worse. The NHS spends most of its resources on preventable conditions like type 2 diabetes and obesity, and the rest of its budget it spends on useless middle managers and diversity officers for the most diverse workforce on the planet. Make it make sense. Now, some people boast that the NHS is the largest employer in Europe. That's not a boast. That is a diabolical admission of how big and inefficient it has become, particularly given that as a nation, we are becoming sicker by the day. So the NHS is bigger and more expensive, but we're getting more ill. Make it make sense. What is going on? Are you and I the only ones asking these questions? The political class are not, and neither are the media. Meanwhile, the blind pursuit of net zero is pushing us closer to something resembling communism, as Man United owner and entrepreneur Sir Jim Ratcliffe reveals today that our suicidal push to go green is wiping out Britain's industrial heartlands. But this government wants growth and wants us to make things. Make it make sense. The bitter truth is that we need the opposite of socialism right now. The country lives beyond its means, with a monthly deficit, which means that more goes out than comes in. A quick interruption to thank you for coming over to YouTube to watch The Mark Dolan Show. But here's an opportunity to see all of my shows longer, unedited, with no ads, all for free at markdolan.com. along with lots of extra content, including bonus interviews and exclusive monologues, plus personal videos from me at home, live chats, and the chance for you to message me directly. Longer show, bonus videos, all ad-free. Just go to markdolan.com and I'll see you there. Britain is effectively less financially solvent than most of its citizens. People are getting 10-year fixed-rate mortgages which are cheaper than the rate at which the current government is now borrowing. So we've got two problems: low growth and high spending. Winston Churchill once faced financial problems of his own, And he said, I have a choice. I can either drink less champagne and get rid of the maid, or write more articles and books. So he chose to write more articles and books. The problem Britain's got is that we've actually got to take both options. Yes, we've got to sack the maid and skip the champagne, but we've got to work far harder as well. In real terms, that means that we have to drastically reduce the size of the state, and we've got to reduce public services and the welfare state. It is only option that we've got. It didn't have to be this way. I would be very keen to draw your attention to my monologues during that cheeky COVID pandemic, in which I warned that the cost to the economy was enormous of the pandemic response. Well, here we are. So going forward, the state must shrink faster than a Greek statue's nether regions in a blizzard. We need to be more productive as a population, with people going into the office, putting a proper shift in, and we need a low-tax environment that boosts national income. Of course, we'll get none of this from Rachel Reeves, who has earned the unflattering title of Rachel from Accounts. Pathetic that Labour's dwindling band of supporters accuse people of being sexist for using that nickname. I don't remember similar accusations of sexism when Liz Truss was vilified for her ill-fated mini-budget and when comparisons were made between our former Prime Minister and a salad vegetable. Amazing, hey? Double standards. Who knew? And if we're going to play the sexism card, it's worth noting that it was Rachel Reeves who made her gender the story by announcing to the world that she was Britain's first female chancellor. For goodness sake, who cares? I was 1 year old, that's right, I was just one, and still drawing milk from my mother's décolletage when the Tories elected their first woman leader. I was just 5 and learning to read and do toilet properly when she became Prime Minister and transformed the country. And yet Rachel Reeves thought it was a story that almost 5 decades later, she's in charge of the Treasury. Do me a favour. Her job wasn't to become Labour's first woman chancellor. Her job was to be Labour's first good chancellor, and that has not happened. Business confidence is the lowest level since the first lockdown. Recruitment is down, growth is going down, and the cost of government borrowing on the international bond market is now higher than Bob Dylan in the 1960s. Following Rachel Reeves's October budget, the Bank of England have predicted higher inflation and more stubbornly high interest rates. And with the tax rate on businesses, it's ordinary working people, apparently so beloved of Sir Keir Starmer, who will pay the price. Labour have been in for 6 months. They've handed over the Chagos Islands. They've had more freebies than you've had hot dinners. They've punished the pensioners, leaving them shivering in their homes. They've clobbered private schools. They've, of course, taxed the farmers. They've impacted lower income families across the board. They've made Britain one of the hardest countries in the world to hire people and do business. Meanwhile, Angela Rayner, Sharon Stone tribute act extraordinaire, has also unleashed a raft of red tape measures on employers, including sick pay from day one, and the inability to sack someone if they're crap at their job, protection that she could probably do with. The great irony is that Starmer and Reeves need a truly conservative budget in order to fulfil a Labour manifesto. I'm delighted that the international bond markets have rejected Britain's latest flirtation with socialism. Rachel from Accounts applied for more funding and the computer said no. It's patently clear that this egregious, wicked and incompetent government are horribly out of their depth. There was no plan for power. It was the biggest con job in history. The election might be 4 years away, but the public won't forget. Let's speak to one of the most prominent and respected voices on the right in this country, former Conservative MP, and now Reform UK's candidate to be Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire in May, Dame Andrea Jenkins. Andrea, welcome to Mark Dolan.
Hi, Mark. Good to see you. I'm glad to see you carrying on.
Oh, listen, absolutely going from strength to strength. Now, is it the duty of all true Conservatives to join Reform?
I would like to see that, certainly, Mark. I mean, I just think I stayed loyal, I went down with a sinking ship, so to speak, but in the end, I just felt that nothing's going to change. They haven't learnt the lessons. And so, yeah, I feel I'm finally at home for the first time in years.
Is Reform UK the home of true Conservatives?
I certainly think so, definitely. This stage where we are at in the political cycle, most definitely. And I mean, I think that, look, I'm a Thatcherite Conservative. I'm sure you remember growing up in the 80s with Margaret Thatcher at the helm. I think the country was in a lot stronger place. And I haven't really been happy since they ousted Boris, which is no surprise. I've been quite outspoken on this. But we had that period as well between 16 and 19 where the party was in disarray over Brexit as well. And we had Theresa May as leader. So I think it's gone through a difficult time, the party. And unfortunately, they still haven't learnt their lesson. I don't think they're fully listening to the British public.
You mentioned Boris. Who would be Prime Minister today if the Conservatives had kept faith in Johnson?
I mean, I think the issue is the makeup of the parliamentary party. I mean, it's even more one nation than it even was when I was in with the new intake. And so I think that with Boris, they got the leader they wanted to get an election, and then they wanted the one nation lot wanted the people they wanted as leader, and then we saw how that turned out with Rishi, etc. So they didn't give Liz Truss a chance, they didn't give Boris a chance, I don't believe, and that's why we're in this mess as a country, because they interfered too much. The MPs did, I think.
Andrea, was your defection to Reform UK negotiated with Nigel Farage?
Oh, I mean, gosh, I'd been, even prior to the general election, I was in conversations. I mean, I think I'd mentioned to you previously, Mark, how I was trying to unite the right even before the election. I was trying to bring the likes of Nigel and even Rishi together to bring both parties together to take the fight to the socialists. So I'd been speaking for months anyway. Then after the election, I got approached after losing my seat. Would I go across? So I've spoke with Nigel, I spoke with Zia, I've spoke with the main people in the party for several months since the election.
You told me on my old show before the election that you were going to keep faith with the Tories because you are a loyal person, and if you look at your record, you are absolutely loyal. You only joined Reform having left the House of Commons. However, do you regret being so loyal? Do you think that if you defected like Lee Anderson pre-election, you might still be a sitting MP? I
mean, I think that would likely be the case, actually, because if you look at the Reform, it split my vote in half and let Labour in. And it was low turnout as well. So I think that would have happened. But no, I don't regret loyalty. I mean, to me, I got elected on as a Conservative, so I went down with a Conservative ship, so to speak. So I think my timing was right and it was comfortable for me. But as I said, I've never felt happier, to be honest, Mark. And
I think your departure was cleaner, wasn't it? Given the fact that you left Parliament, and that's the point where you kind of think, right, what is the future? Tell me why you feel happier and freer now.
I feel happier and freer because I feel that I'm in a party who gets it. They actually care about what the British public think. And as I said when I went over, I'm in the party of the brave, Mark. We've got the likes of Nigel, Richard Tice, etc., Zia, who say things as it is, which people are often thinking but don't say. And we see Lee Anderson does that as well, don't we? And that's always been my style, as you know, whenever I've come on your shows, Mark. You do the same, don't you? It's great to sort of be feeling like you're among friends in a way. You're among like-minded people, and you feel that you're on this mission to do the best for Britain. And on top of that, though, what's great is because I feel at home and comfortable. I mean, I've never been one for trotting the party line out, but ever really. But you can just be yourself, which I think is so important.
How did the party of Margaret Thatcher get taken over by the Tory wets?
I think the Tory wets have always been there, as we saw with Margaret. And yes, I don't know how that happened, but it did. And
Was there an element of David Cameron's premiership with, was it the Cameroons, the Cameron Babes, all women shortlists? I mean, I'm a big fan of female politicians. My political hero is Margaret Thatcher. I've got the highest respect for you. But, things like box ticking, the Conservatives sort of embracing the net zero agenda, which began under Cameron, if you think about it.
Yes. I mean, look, I think Cameron, I won't criticise him because he fully supported him, and Osborne fully supported me getting elected in 2015. And, but I think, like you said about the the all-women shortlist, but also the open primaries, it attracted, for example, do you remember Sarah Wollaston? Dr. Sarah Wollaston, big Remainer, she left the party. And I remember being on the Health Select Committee with her. Very nice lady, but clearly more of a Lib Dem. I think she might have even gone there now, than a Conservative. So I think we got attracted even more people who are not necessarily, in my opinion, true Conservatives. And the party went woke. I mean, I'll just give an example. My late mum, she was in her late 70s at the time, and she liked to post, which my mum wasn't good on social media, she didn't have good eyesight, she liked to post which was about sending illegal migrants back. And the party, and I asked mum about it, she said, oh, well, I'm like, when I'm scrolling, I can hardly see it, I don't even realise I'd liked it. I mean, she'd look at my opposition and like opposition candidates' posts. And so I explained it to them. And so what they did, they suspended my mum's membership.
No.
And it took 2 years to get her being back. I mean, she'd been a loyal campaigner, a party member for years. She was president of my association for all the work that she'd done. And so she was suspended. And the only way that they would let her do the party is if she did this 10 module, which was several hours of all the wokey identity politics course. And so I did it for her, just kept clicking it. I said, look, mum, this is a matter of principle. I'm going
and
to
it was all horrible propaganda, social engineering, brainwashing.
And what is a pansexual and things like this. I mean, this is the Conservatives. And so I think that even CCHQ had been taken over, unfortunately, Mark. And I don't know if you saw, do you know Claire Bullivant? You ought to get her on your show, actually. She's great. She runs a Conservative Post. And she's found out, she did an article yesterday, which I'll send you.
Please.
You've got this, literally, they're just moving the deck chairs around on the ship. I mean, we know that Kemi is very close to the Dougie Smiths of this world. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but if you actually see the inside, and I was in the Whip's office when they got rid of Boris, there's a few stories I could tell. The Dougie Smiths of this world, his wife is now in there training up candidates. Munira Mers is training up all the candidates and all the MPs, but these are the people who helped bring the party down under Boris anyway. And these are the people who's at the helm under Kemi.
Just regarding Boris, again, there's a theme of your career and your life, which is loyalty, and you really took a bullet for Boris at that time when
loyal to those I respect. If I don't respect somebody, I can be a pain in the bottom.
Of course. And listen, Boris Johnson, an incredibly clever man, a formidable politician, an election-winning machine. This is a guy that kept Jeremy Corbyn out of number 10 in 2019. Yes. And of course, he got Brexit across the line. So history is going to judge this guy very kindly. But as a true Conservative, are you not bothered by some of his other policies whilst PM? So, for example, opening the border effectively with upwards of 1 million people entering the country legally on his watch, or at least shortly thereafter. And of course, his passion for net zero. Do you not think that his track record as a Conservative is a little patchy?
Look, I'll always like and respect Boris as a friend, and his wife Carrie, and they're actually really lovely people and great parents as well. You ought to see them with their little ones; they're both amazing.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, give me a leader where you agree with every policy. I am a skeptic with net zero. I don't like the record on immigration, but I know that it goes more than, you can't just lay it at Boris's feet, unfortunately. I know from Pretty how she had a massive fight on her hands with the civil servants, as Liz Truss called it, the blob. Because, I mean, look how they tried to do a bullying claim against Pretty when she was trying to fight back in the Home Office. So I think the whole thing needs shaking up, and I think we need to, if we're going to have a democratically elected government to deliver, I think we need to look at the civil servants as well, actually, on what we do with them. I think we need a system like they have in the US, where the top levels you bring in every time there's a new government, because I think that's the only way that you get things delivered. I mean, I had, as a minister myself, lots of eye rolling with my suggestions, which were just like even Conservative policy manifesto stuff. So it is very much, yes, minister, they try and block you. And I mean, did I ever tell you the example over the Office for Students? That was under my remit as a skills minister, and they wanted a layman on the board, which is usually a former student. And the CVs they showed me, 5 out of 6 was very wokey. I looked on their social media. They actually followed Jeremy Corbyn. They were into the whole trans rally, and there was one person who was remotely conservative.
Yeah.
Now, what happened was, I went to the civil servants and I said, how many applicants did you have? 170. I said, well, what criteria did you use for selecting these 6? We'll get back to you. I said, well, I would like to see every CV, and I will go through them myself, because this is important. Because if we don't get balance in these outside bodies and organisations, we're never going to get true conservatism. And what happened, the civil servants, they bought some time, and they then went to the Secretary of State, who was James Cleverly at the time, and got him to sign it off the day before he knew he was getting Foreign Secretary. So they shoved it under his nose.
He wanted to get it done.
Yeah, even though, I mean, I had actually said to him, look out for this. If they bring that to your desk, please don't sign it off. But he signed it off. I mean, we don't know what the conversation was there, but it just shows you the sneakiness about it, Mark. And yeah, that's just one example.
Even Labour, and I know you don't have much regard for this Labour government, but it was reported in the Sunday Times 2 weeks ago that they're struggling with the blob as well. Essentially, it's a sort of rump of civil servants, public sector apparatchiks who have got their own agenda.
Yes, no, I agree with you. Yeah. And it seems to be very much a boys' club in a way, not just, like gender boys, but it's people getting their own people with their same views within the civil service, and most are working from home. I remember Brandon Lewis, when he was the Northern Ireland Secretary, I was in Northern Ireland with him, having arguments with a senior civil servant saying, look, we are one of the lowest departments now, highest departments of people working from home. This is crazy. Yeah. And the battle that I saw that he had, and I backed him up in those meetings, it is just crazy.
Well, indeed, it is crazy. Speaking of crazy, what is your appraisal of Labour's approach to education in this country?
Look, I think it's a politics of envy. I feel that we've got a bunch of socialist students in charge. I mean, if you look at Bridget Phillipson, her tweets going back, and also the Chancellor's, Rachel Reeves, they've got the politics of envy there. Now, if you look back at their tweets, Bridget Phillipson, the way she was attacking even grammar schools. I mean, Lincolnshire's got so many grammar schools, which I'm very proud of. I mean, Margaret Thatcher went to one of them, didn't she? And the way they was attacking private schools, both of them. And it really is the politics of envy. Now, and like we've seen with all their policy ideas, and what I'm really worried about, I mean, I know you're a parent, Mark, is this whole RSHE, what's going to happen in schools. I mean, when I was the skills minister, the first I heard about it when I took the skills brief, it wasn't under my brief, but a constituent said to me that the schools would not show the parents the materials of what was being taught. And some of the stuff I had got hold of was quite explicit, I think, for primary school children. And so the fact that this was allowed to happen under the Conservatives, I'm quite ashamed about. But I think I know who that comes under, which I'll tell you off the call, why this, I think this problem started.
I might be able to guess.
Well, it's not Prime Minister level. It's I know which minister brought all this in, and it actually went through during lockdown. This RSHE legislation. Now, so I just think we're going to get this on steroids, Mike, don't you? All the being able to change genders, etc., being taught in schools, and I mean, one good thing, Rishi did start fighting back on it, didn't he? And I was quite pleased with that, but I just think it's an open door now, and God knows where we're going to end up and what's going to be taught our schools. I mean, there's going to be trigger warnings on things, isn't there?
Yeah, there most definitely are. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, all the rest of it. And of course, it looks like academies may be under threat. If we're honest, Labour don't believe in choice, do they? Certainly not parental choice. And it looks like the unions aren't keen on testing or on exams. They hate merit, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the bizarre thing is, though, academisation started under Labour. And so for them to attack it, they're really attacking something that they first brought in under Blair. I mean, I think academies are great, but I think why they are looking at this is because academies, I mean, if you look at the latest stuff, they are not going to be able to opt out of teaching some of the national curriculum stuff, some of the RSHE stuff, and do it their own way. Academies could have that freedom, and I think with Labour, look, they're attacking private schools. I've no doubt it'd be grammar schools next, looking at the social media, as I said, of the education secretary. But they want control of the narrative, in my opinion, and so by attacking the freedoms of academies, then they will get that.
And one of the worst ideas I've heard floated is a very socialist idea, which is making it harder for schools to expel problematic pupils.
Yeah, no.
I mean, what's up for you? You know, given your experience as a schools minister, what are the implications for the classroom if troublesome kids from maybe chaotic domestic settings remain at school? Why is that a problem?
Look, I mean, I wasn't the schools minister. Unfortunately, I'd love to.
No, you were, but you were in the schools education department.
I was in skills, so mine was higher education.
Forgive me.
But no, I mean, these problem children, you're right, you know, they come from difficult families, what they've seen in life. And let's face it, you know, the whole, social worker system needs shaking up. We need intervention sooner. I mean, my dad used to say to me, you know, you need a license to drive a car, but not be a good parent. And it's right, you know, so I think some people should not be parents the way they treat their children, to be honest with you.
No.
So we do need to intervene early. And those children they've got to go somewhere, but it's a disruption to other children. I mean, it'll become a place where there's no place of consequence if things go wrong. And remember, I mean, under Blair, they brought in no smacking, didn't they? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember that. Correct.
I mean, I don't smack Clifford, but do you know if it's
the messaging of that policy is clear, isn't it?
Yes, but also if a child's going to touch something hot or go near a fire, you'll shout or something like that, don't you? To stop them, they need to learn of what dangers are. So I think what happened then, I mean, I had a friend who worked in the education sector during that time, was that teachers lost control of the classroom. So I think it wasn't about smacking, as you said. It was actually just a message of actually ensuring that the pupils had more rights and they would fight back then. So there was less control for teachers. And I think it's going to be even more that way with, bad teachers, suspend, get rid of them. But one thing teachers are not there to do is parent. You know, parents should parent.
No. And actually, that's one positive record of the Conservatives in office is education, isn't it? Whether it's mathematics, literacy, and a number of other disciplines. We had more schools in
good or outstanding since 2010 than ever before in the history, which was amazing.
Yeah, and also, I mean, look, call me old-fashioned, but shouldn't there be more exams and more testing, not less?
That's a hard balance. I think it depends whom. Look, I've got a special needs child, is on the autistic spectrum, got ADHD. He struggles with concentration, is behind. It's about 18 months behind. And so he needs these creative ways of being taught things. So I think it depends on the child, actually. If they've got special educational needs, we need a slightly different approach. But I do think we need a teaching system which is more kinesthetic, where people learn from not only doing visual auditory as well, but by actually doing stuff in the classroom. I think that actually is a better learning style as well. So should there be more exams? Well, I don't think there should be less exams.
Let's talk about when you defected to Reform UK, Andrea. Did you lose friends?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I actually lost a friend of 15 years, Mark. I haven't gone public with this, but this was one of my best friends who, the hypocrisy is, she defected to UKIP previously, and I supported her. And, you know, when she stood for UKIP in 2015, I was standing for the Conservatives. I even brought her into the House of Commons, and people were saying, "Oh, what are you still talking to her for?" I said, "Well, friendship goes beyond this." And she lives in Lincolnshire, and now she's blocked me on Facebook. She's no longer talking to me. So to me, that's somebody who's not a true friend. And I'll stick up for my friends. I'm a bit of a tiger mum. I'm a tiger when my friends are concerned and loyal. So I found that upsetting, but everything happens for a reason. But no, I mean, those who's been at the top of politics have been amazing, actually, Mark.
I'm pleased to hear that. Why do you think, and I'm really sorry about what you've been through with your friend, and I've had it myself.
Yes.
I took a position against the lockdowns. I thought it was crazy to have so many lockdowns, to have all that economic damage for a virus that was nasty but non-fatal to the majority of the population. And, you know, some people...
Right, haven't you? Yeah.
Well, maybe, you know, but I definitely fell out with people, or they fell out with me. Why are some people so illiberal?
I mean, I just wonder whether, you're right. Why are some people like that? I guess some people like to sit in their own comfort zone, don't they? And I mean, with this particular friend, you know, she's actually more centre right than I am, so it's a very bizarre decision.
It is.
Yeah, but no, I just think in times like this, which you probably found, you find out who your true friends are, and this is why I sort of defend Boris, I defend Liz, I defend Suella, and I defend Robert Jenrick, actually, because, you know, they've all been good friends through thick and thin, actually, and I've got a lot of respect for them still.
That's it. Well, you judge people by how they treat you, don't you? Now, you've had a good relationship with Nigel Farage before, during and since your defection. He is arguably the most consequential politician of his generation, perhaps alongside Boris Johnson. Now that you're in the party, you're kind of clearly fantastic news in the polls. You know, level pegging with Labour as the most supported party in the country was absolutely extraordinary. But Nigel's feeling the heat at the moment, isn't he? The press are on his case. Allegedly, he's got 9 jobs. I don't know if he's made about £500,000 outside of Parliament in the last 6 months. Why do you think the press are after him at this moment in time?
I think there's some deflection, actually, because, look, it was only, 3 months ago, all the expenses and donations that Labour was getting, Keir Starmer, all the freebies and all that lot. So the heat was on them, and the left-wing media, they had to attack them. So they need to find the person who they want to attack, who they're more comfortable with now, which is Nigel. And Nigel's always been attacked by mainstream media, hasn't he? So
yeah.
And I think because we are soaring ahead, they now realise what a threat he and Reform are. So I think the attacks are going to get worse, actually, Mark.
Now, that's interesting, isn't it? The establishment are not happy. Is there a conflict for Nigel? Very much man of the people. You know, this is a guy that speaks for millions of ordinary folk who are worried about the direction of the country. He's an extremely authentic man. He says what he thinks. But is there a conflict between that and his high income outside of Parliament? I mean, are his critics right to point out that potential, you know, conflict in his brand?
I mean, in all honesty, I haven't seen what these 9 jobs are, to be honest. So I don't know, is stuff long-standing? Is it to do with his media? So I can't comment on Nigel personally, because I don't know what the details are. But about MPs and second jobs, I mean, look, I had a job when I was a backbencher. It was 1 day a week, 8 hours a week, and which could be done on an evening, and that was for a think tank of a university. So, but I fitted that in my own time. And I'd, just bought a house myself after selling my house and living with mum to become a candidate in the first place. I needed to get back on the property ladder. And so I did that as a way, and people think, 70 grand salary, what it was at the time, but they don't know how you get into debt as a candidate. I mean, I had 2 years without any income and living off credit cards to become a candidate. So you need to get back on your feet. I mean, that's why I sold my house, moved in with mum for 2 years to stand against Ed Balls. So I think it's not always as clear cut as people see it, unfortunately.
No, it isn't. And although
in an ideal world, people wouldn't have these second jobs. And I mean, I'm an insomniac anyway, so I'm one of these who sort of do my emails at 3 o'clock in the morning. So it never impacted on my constituents having that 8 hours a week extra role. So.
And we also, don't we want entrepreneurs and high achievers in the House of Commons rather than, ex-public sector workers and
don't want career politicians.
Party campaigners, career politicians.
Absolutely.
People that have never lived in the real world, never had a real job.
Yeah, exactly. And Nigel has seen both sides of life as well. So when you speak to him, he does understand what life's about.
Well, if I was Nigel, I would point out that, he would be making a lot more money if he wasn't a member of Parliament, and he's actually made life harder for himself by seeking to represent the views of millions of people in this country. Speaking of representing views, you've got a huge project this year. You're running to become mayor of Greater Lincolnshire. Why?
I mean, it sort of came out of the blue in just a conversation, actually, Mark. I mean, I know when I've been on your previous shows, I didn't know if I wanted to go on frontline politics again. I was very disheartened because I saw that nobody, even in the Conservative Party, was listening to me of what I was hearing on the ground, and I could see where we was heading with a Labour supermajority, and I knew what damage they'd do. So I was very disillusioned, but in the conversations with Zia and Nigel, I guess it made me realise you can't stay silent, really, when it's in your soul, Mark, like with presenting. If you believe in something, you can't stay silent. And when it was just like discussions, and when they realised that I've got a background right across Lincolnshire from, going to school there, college, university, worked there, taught in schools there, then the discussion just led that way. Neither of us was actually looking and pointing that out initially, but it sort of naturally formed in conversations. So that's how it ended up. Now, it is a massive task. I mean, look, it's Labour-controlled North Lincolnshire, North East, and Lincolnshire itself. Conservative-controlled in all these areas. It's always been a Conservative heartland. I was a county councillor. I was one of the councillors there as Conservatives. However, polling is really good at the moment, and even in our private polling, it's pretty good. And they've picked a candidate, Mark, Conservatives have, who is very woke and who believes there's a climate emergency, who actually wants to reach net zero quicker than the government targets, the only flags I want to see raised is the county flag or the union flag, but they have ceremonies every year raising the rainbow flag, which he's put videos out. I mean, LGBT community, no, I've got no problem with that. I've got friends who in the LGBT community, but to me, you can't keep changing your flags every week. I mean, what will it be? Next Palestinian flags?
Well, probably would be if they had their way. And the whole point about the rainbow flag, it's greatly misunderstood, because in the old days, when you and I were in our 20s and 30s, the rainbow flag meant that you are open to, liberal towards gay rights, which most people are. The rainbow flag now is a very political symbol. It's incredibly divisive and is detested by many gay people and an awful lot of women because of what it represents, particularly
the trans stuff,
the gender identity ideology. That's an exciting prospect for you
Yeah.
in May. You've got a good chance of winning. What is your message to the people of Greater Lincolnshire?
Well, I want to blow that door off, actually, metaphorically, because I just think that we can't just do like the Conservatives at the moment, shuffling around the deck chairs. They've got a council leaders candidate. Nothing will change. It'll be the status quo. And I'd like to do what Elon's going to do under Trump's administration. I want to see all the contracts. I want to look at every penny of taxpayers' money to see it's been well spent. I want to look at their tendering process, because I'll give an example. Lincolnshire County Council's given a contract, £54,000, to the makers of Wallace and Gromit to produce a video on flooding. And to me, that's a tremendous waste of money. I mean, the people of Lincolnshire, there's a major flooding problem. They are aware of flooding. But why not get a local college to do it? Why not do it in-house? And I don't like management consultants coming in, wastage of money. I think we need to spend taxpayers' money better. I'm sticking up for our farmers. And the net zero stuff, I think we need to be sensible about this. I think we should never try and control how people heat their homes, what cars to drive. Now, the only thing I'd say is the remit, sorry if I'm going off at these tangents, but the remit has been really downgraded by the Conservative leaders along with Angela Rayner. Now, just like Andy Street in the West Midlands and Ben Houchin, they had a lot of power. They could have their own team. You can't even get your own member of a team with this, Mark. They've really actually put a stranglehold on the role because they want to hold on to power. So the first thing I will do is, we know that Angela Rayner actually wants to give more control to mayors. I will come knocking on her door, and because I think you've got to be in the role to then try and blow it apart in a way,
yes,
and get the best for the county. I mean, there's lots we can do. We can be spearheading flooding defences. We can also, we're going to be having a pilot for housing, which would be brilliant. And I'm going tomorrow, Mark, to see in Hull, they have these homes for veterans. And
brilliant.
They have this whole veterans village, what they just got planning permission for. And when you look at the likes of Boston, which nearly 25% of their social housing goes on to people who's not, from other countries. When, as an MP for years, you saw people waiting 4 or 5 years on a housing list. To me, it's about fairness, Mark. So I want to look at all these areas and make sure what we do is fair for the people of Lincolnshire.
And Greater Lincolnshire is a mighty county with huge potential.
Yes. And it's so diverse. I used to live in the north and northeast, and I've lived in Lincolnshire itself. If you look at Grimsby, Scunthorpe, Imicum, it's got lots of areas of deprivation with cycle after cycle of families and very little investment. We've seen British Steels up there. Then you've got the likes of Skegness, which is seasonal work. Then you've got the whole farming communities, and literally they are the breadbasket of the UK. They supply the UK. So, I went to see the farmers with the flooding damage this week, and there's basic things such as the Environment Agency. They won't let them dredge the drains and rivers and ditches. So therefore, it's not not good enough flood defences. So there's so much that can be done, and if we don't get it right, then obviously the food security affects the rest of the country, doesn't it?
Now, Andrea, most farmers will tell you, as well as climate scientists, that the climate is changing. Is Reform UK's policy of scrapping net zero altogether irresponsible?
No, I don't think it is, because look, it's what scientists they publicise. Nigel Lawson, he set up the think tank, didn't he?
Former Chancellor, of course, and something of a climate sceptic.
Yes, he set up the think tank to actually challenge the net zero consensus, because when you've got a homogenised view with all the main parties, there's no scrutiny, and I think that's what's happened. There's been no one scrutinised. So when Nigel Lawson died, I became an unpaid director. So I've seen sort of the amazing academic research which has counter arguments to what they are saying, actually. So, but because the whole mainstream media and globally they are pushing this agenda, they'll only choose what they want to put out there, aren't they? So
And
we've got a fight on our hands.
if it's not about saving the planet, what is behind the push for net zero, do you think?
What's behind it? I mean, look, I think there's nothing wrong with creating something sustainable for our children. Look, I'm a parent myself. I want to be a grandparent one day. I'm sure you're the same.
Yeah.
And I'm a vegetarian who loves animals, and I want the best thing for nature as well. But we've got to have a common sense approach. And I mean, I'm pro fracking. I think we need to look at solutions which is going to be cheap for the consumer, because we can't have some of the highest energy costs in the world like we've got in the UK.
Fracking is clean.
Yes, exactly. And so what, I mean, look, we saw it started in America, didn't it? And it's a whole industry of where people's making money from this. I mean, I got asked in the Lords to give a speech where the speaker had pulled out with a group of businesses who were all the pro net zero. And I said, I'll come and give a speech, but I am against the consensus on net zero. Oh, well, it'd be interesting. And there was about, 60 businesses in the room. And when I got down to the nub of it, there was, most of these were benefiting from it. Their industry was benefiting. They was getting money from government. But when I was speaking to some of them after my speech, oh, well, we actually agree with you, but this is good business for us. So, people will go where the money is, actually, won't they, Mark?
They will indeed. On reform, Ben Habib was a popular figure in Reform UK, a big campaigner as well, helped them to achieve the success that they have. He's now left the party. Is there a danger that reform will descend into civil war?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, I've never met Ben. We've exchanged a couple of texts previously. I like some of the things he stands for, not all of them. But I just feel he's got this agenda to try and bring reform down. I mean, I don't know what happened between them. Only they know themselves, the conversations. But what is that knock-on effect going to be is that we'll have a conservative light government next time where they're not too conservatives, or we'll have a socialist government. I think, if anything, these dissenting voices should actually be speaking together now for the country. It's not about personal egos. This is about what's doing right for our country now.
Couple of quick ones before you go. I know you're very busy. It's great to have you on the show, Andrea. And what is your appraisal of Kemi Badenoch as leader of the party that you once were part of?
No, I mean...
Do you rate her? Did they back the wrong horse, given the alternative was Robert Jenrick, who looks and sounds like a Reform UK spokesman?
But I mean, look at Suella. She wasn't given a chance even, was she? Again, the makeup of the parliamentary party for the Conservatives is too left-wing. I think she's trying her best, but I just don't think she's cutting it, to be honest with you.
Wow.
And I don't think she's capable of cutting it. And this is why I left the party. I just think that ridiculous video out there saying how she's never wrong, she doesn't apologise. I mean, that's just bizarre to me. Isn't it human nature to have feelings and apologise if you're in the wrong? I just think it's quite a bizarre thing to say, and an arrogance there, really. And do I think she's any good? Well, I think PMQs are not actually that great. And so they're really going to have to up their game. And I guess the true test is look at the polling. For a new opposition leader, they're not doing that great, are they?
No, it does seem like they're struggling. And do you anticipate any further high-profile defections to reform like yours? I mean, could Suella Braverman, could she cross the floor metaphorically, actually literally, if she were to join reform and sit next to Nigel Farage? Do you think could she reform, move to reform?
I'm sure the party would welcome with her open arms. I mean, I haven't had that conversation with her.
Do you think she's angling for that? I mean, if you listen to some of her recent pronouncements, it seems like she's in a party that doesn't represent her views. I know this shouldn't matter, but her husband has defected to Reform UK and is now a big campaigner for the cause. I just wonder whether the mood music suggests a big scalp for Nigel Farage is coming.
Look, I don't want to put words in Suella's mouth, and only she knows that. And I know it is a big decision leaving a party what you've been a member of for decades, because your friends, family are in that. So I don't want to comment on Suella because generally I don't know.
No,
but
fair
I
enough.
do know of another big name that we are getting. Well, it's somebody who's been to the front line of government type of thing. So I do know somebody who we are getting.
Well, that's very exciting.
I'm not saying they are still an MP, but I do know somebody who is coming across.
Watch this space. How exciting. Listen, before you go, you had a very tough year last year. You've had a hard couple of years. You've been through a lot and you lost your seat in July, which is no fun at all. How did you get through it?
Faith and love for my little boy, to be honest with you, Mark. I believe everything happens for a reason. I believe in God, and I believe whatever gets put in your path, it's a test to see how you're going to deal with it. And losing mum, going through divorce, my sister having to be resuscitated after the COVID jab and waking up paralysed, then losing seat. It hasn't been the easiest time, but. No, I'm happy. I'm in a good place. And I think when you've got children, you view life differently, don't you, Mark? You
do.
view life through the lens of, this isn't about me. This is about trying to provide for my little boy and make the best for him and make sure that he's got a good future. So that'll always get you through anything, I think, as a parent.
Well, he's got an incredible mum, and it could be the people of Greater Lincolnshire might have a fantastic mayor in May. I mean, honestly, the prospects for you this year are potentially huge. How can residents of Greater Lincolnshire find out more about your campaign and your policy promises?
Brilliant. Yes. I mean, I'm going to be launching my manifesto in February. But no, I've got my Andrea 4, as in the number for mayor, website.co.uk. And I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. Please message me and or email me. My email address, it actually comes to me into my phone, is on the website. So contact me and please come and help. Yep.
So Andrea4mayor.co.uk, or simply Google Andrea and the number 4 mayor. Andrea, you've been so generous with your time. Thank you for joining us on the Mark Dolan Show, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you, Mark, and all the best.
Now, as Reform UK make history by topping a national opinion poll for the first time ever, is Nigel Farage now an unstoppable political force? Let's ask the former Conservative Member of Parliament for Workington, one of the 2019 Red Wall heroes, Mark Jenkinson. Hey, Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you again.
Well, it's really good to see you again. Reform can't be dismissed as a fringe force anymore, can they?
Well, they certainly can't be dismissed as that. Your intro there asked whether they were an unstoppable force, and I don't believe, and you might expect me to say this, I don't believe that is the case. My history, of course, I left the Conservative Party back in 2013 to join what was then a fringe party polling 3%, led by Nigel Farage, the UK Independence Party. I wanted to fight for my referendum on EU membership. And then post-referendum came back to the Conservatives to deliver on that referendum. And I do think, so to some extent, I've seen some of this before. I polled nearly 20% in Workington in 2015 as general election candidate. So we were doing, we won a national election then as UKIP in the EU referendum in 2019, of course, a few years later. So in the EU elections. So to some extent, we've been around this block, and the Conservative Party has to work out how to deal with the reform threat, or did have to work out how to deal with the reform threat, still do to some extent. Of course, there is another party now that has to work out how to deal with the reform threat, and that is the Labour Party, now that they're in government, because as we've seen in by-elections, reform are a threat. It's that anti-establishment vote is a threat to the Labour Party now. So And I think we've seen Ben Habib wrote yesterday about how Nigel Farage is tacking to the left while Kemi is tacking to the right. So I just think there's quite an interesting dynamic now in UK politics. Reform definitely were a threat to us and cost me my seat in this last general election. But what happens going forward, I think, is very much one to watch.
Are Reform UK a problem of the Conservatives' own making?
Without a doubt. Well, yes, and the Labour Party. I don't want to play down our part in that, but and both main parties, if you like, that are not having delivered for not just the last 14 years some things that people wanted, but for the last 4 or 5 decades. You know, and we can talk about EU membership and what that's done for some of that over the last 4 or 5 decades. But the politicians not delivering what they promise is what ultimately, and what people want to see is ultimately what drives the Reform vote, without a doubt. So we are absolutely culpable. There was things that we should have done in 14 years, ending the quangos that run the country. The day-to-day running of the country is not down to the government anymore. It's down to quangos, which ministers take all the flack for, but have no control over. So there's a lot of things that we should have done that we didn't do that ultimately led to our huge defeat, including my own defeat in July of this year.
And now Reform are going to cut tax, unleash the potential of Brexit. They're going to stop the boats. They're going to more or less end legal net migration. And they're going to scrap net zero. They are now the true Conservatives, aren't they?
Well, no, so I disagree. I disagree with that assessment. So Reform want to cut taxes for some people. They want to shift the tax burden. They are what I've described as neo-socialist. They are big state, state working in conjunction with business, not necessarily a bad thing. Pro-nationalisation of utilities, for example. The state, if you look at Reform's contract manifesto that they produced for the July general election, the state would have ballooned. The tax burden would have shifted from 36 million individual taxpayers down to 29 million. Well, the extra money has to come from somewhere, and it can't be, you know, there was things like cutting foreign aid that had already been done, so that can't be counted again, which I don't disagree with, by the way. But so it shifts the tax burden. Increasing the VAT threshold, great idea. Someone has to pay for it. VAT brings in £170 billion a year to the Exchequer. That's not an inconsiderable sum. So that all we're doing is shifting the VAT burden, the individual tax burden, the burden on companies, so altering corporation rates, corporation tax rates, for example, which again I'm in favour of. But what does that do to other businesses that still pay corporation tax? And so it's, the manifesto was about, and they talk quite clearly about reducing taxes on workers, no bad thing, but they make that distinction. They make that distinction deliberately, because a lot of what they're proposing are the same notes that Rachel Reeves are playing, just played on a different instrument. So I think, and the problem is that people aren't looking in detail because they want an outlet for frustration. They don't think Nigel Farage is going to be Prime Minister of a Reform-led government. They want an outlet for their frustration. We need to regain people's trust on the promises.
But Mark, isn't that slightly patronising to Reform voters, many of whom are former Conservative voters? The idea that it's just a protest, it's just kind of, you know, a howling at the moon type scenario, when really they're looking at the agenda, the scrapping of net zero, the ending of political correctness, the pretty much cessation of legal and illegal immigration. These aren't protest policies. These are real policies that would have been adopted by the Conservatives 20 years ago.
To some extent, and I don't want to, just to be clear, Mark, I don't mean to patronise, but the fact is that the bulk of the vote comes from disaffection. Some of it definitely does come from the policies, for example, but having knocked tens of thousands of doors in July, most people couldn't tell me what reform policies were, but they knew they were fed up with us, and formerly a lot of them with the Labour Party. I took one of those red wall seats that shifted significantly over the last 3 years. The new seat that I fought in, the new boundary I fought in July was considerably different, but the seat that I was fighting, that I'd held for 5 years, was one of those seats that's seen that shift from Labour through to Boris's Conservatives in 2019. And I've trodden a similar path. I was brought up a Labour voter, joined the Conservatives, obviously had the flirt with UKIP, back to the Conservatives. So I certainly don't want to patronise anybody, but the fact is the bulk of that vote is dissatisfaction. What I would also say about things like net zero is what reform offer are very simple solutions to very complex problems. Most people, when you drill down into polling, are in favour of reducing the carbon intensity of the grid, for example, through wind, solar. We should be making use. Most people think we should be making use of house roofs and building roofs for solar. We should be building wind. What they don't want is their bills to go up on the back of that. So that's what we've got to be careful of. And of course, the policies that we've enacted over the last 3 or 4 years on contracts for difference, for example, mean that the state does not pay wind operators any subsidy for wind production. And in fact, the prices that we're paying are half of the current market average, not yesterday's market average, market peak, which is £5,500 a megawatt hour, but half of the market average. So we never end up paying them anything. What we do is pay them to turn off because of issues with the grid, when wind is overproducing for what we've forecast. And that's what we've got to find a way of doing. And there are ways, I could go into detail. Power production is partly my background. I could go into detail on the ways to do that. But so it is, they're offering very simple solutions to very complex problems, and suggesting sometimes that things are problems that aren't, if that makes sense.
What's your view of Nigel Farage? What do you think of Nigel Farage, Mark?
I think Nigel is a smooth operator. I think he's a good orator. I think he has an ability, in the same way that Boris did, to connect with people right across the human spectrum. There is a point at which he does turn some people off. I think his principles today are a bit different to the ones that he held in 2013 when I joined UKIP, a party that had libertarian in its constitution. And when I look at the manifesto reforms contract, it's quite far from libertarian. They've got a deputy leader who wanted people sacked for not being jabbed. We want renationalisation of industry, bigger state. So I just think I think he's shifted with political winds over time, but his impact on UK politics can never be understated. His impact on delivering that referendum, for example, I think can't be understated.
Is he a good man? Is he an authentic politician? If he became Prime Minister, would he do a good job?
Is he? So I think, look, I can't comment on authenticity. I think he's certainly shifted.
Well, I think just to help you, because I don't want to put you in a corner here, but Ben Habib, who's left the party, has effectively characterised Nigel Farage as something of a fraud. Is that fair?
Probably not. I don't think so. I don't know him personally to comment, but from what I've seen, there has certainly been a shift in his politics over the last 10 or 12 years, 14 years maybe, that I've sort of watched him. And but that happens regularly to politicians anyway, and the closer you get to Westminster, the more your focus can shift. So I don't doubt his authenticity. I would never characterise him as a fraud at all. I can't comment on what it'd be like.
Is he an opportunist, though? Is he an opportunist and a populist, which is sometimes laid at his door?
So politically, without a doubt, he is an opportunist to some extent. He takes a political opportunity when he spies it, as do all politicians. Is he a populist? Yes. Is there anything necessarily wrong with that? Well, no, by definition, his policies are popular. What I would like to see more of is a bit more honesty around some of the policies, because it is very easy to promote simple, single line, 3-word solutions to very complex problems. And I think we've just got to be a bit careful. I think that's what's caused some of the problem that we have in UK politics at the minute, is what people think are politicians speaking with forked tongue.
Haven't we had sort of simple solutions from the likes of Javier Milei in Argentina and Giorgia Meloni in Italy? I mean, these people have been proved right with a simple populist message. We're going to tackle immigration, we're going to reduce inflation, and we're going to get the economy growing. I mean, at the moment, the cost of borrowing is cheaper for the Italians than it is for the Brits, and their debt is 140% of their economy. So they've done something right.
Absolutely. Look, I don't disagree. That is a policy platform that the Conservatives should be standing on. What we shouldn't be doing is suggesting that we can somehow stop the boats by going to war with France, which is ultimately what having the Navy put some small boat arrivals on a naval boat and dropping them off on the French shore would end up with. I mean, it's just, this is what I mean about simple solutions to very complex problems. We've got to fix immigration. I think that we've allowed the conflation of legal migration and illegal migration. We've allowed legal migration to hit levels that it shouldn't, partly because we've been bedding in a new system, partly because after COVID we wanted healthcare workers and some replacements for a lot of the Eastern Europeans who went home during COVID and realised they didn't have to come here to earn a decent
plus
living.
Ukraine, plus Hong Kong.
Yeah, which again aren't huge numbers in the grand scheme of things, but are enough to shift them. We should absolutely be standing, with our doors open to people like the Hong Kongers who we in 1997 we threw to the wolves, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but why should my viewers and listeners to the Mark Dolan show forgive the Conservatives, given that they presided over enormous levels of legal and illegal immigration, given the fact that it was Theresa May who signed up for net zero, which is clearly having an impact on the economy, also on the national balance sheet? Why should my viewers and listeners forgive your lot?
Well, look, there is no doubt we made mistakes, but I think on net zero, for example, reducing our carbon, our reliance on fossil fuels, carbon intensity of the grid, is what people expect of government without making them colder and poorer. This is the position I've always taken. So we need to use technological advancements. Net zero 2050, it's 25 years away. We will see lots of technological advancement. What we mustn't do is rush headlong into making bills more expensive, over-reliance on intermittency, which is what we're doing, over-reliance on imports, which we'd allowed previously, and then Ukraine, Putin's invasion of Ukraine shows us
why have the deadline of 2050 when China are burning fossil fuels for fun? Why not just kind of gradually and organically approach a green future in a way that suits the economy and doesn't impact people's cost of living, which of course it very much has? Look at those energy bills.
So I think it's worth having a target in mind. I think personally, and this was not a policy of ours, and I'm not suggesting it will be, but I think personally we should be allowed to offset, as other countries in their 2050 goals have allowed offsetting of the hardest sort of 10-15% of emissions, because you can get more bang for your buck by enabling, for example, developing countries to bypass oil, coal, gas and move straight to British-built small modular reactors using some of our foreign aid. What better way to increase prosperity across developing countries, then use now foreign aid to lift them into the position that we are as far as nuclear energy goes, for example. So I think that we've just got to get back to basics somewhat as a Conservative Party, show people that we have solutions to the problems that they want to see, because these things do poll well until you start drilling down into, do you want to pay for it? And
Most definitely. No, you're absolutely right. And of course, now that you're out of the House of Commons, out of politics, you can be super honest. Although, as you said to me the other day, you've always been honest. So can you be honest with me about the current leadership? Robert Jenrick has made a lot of headlines. He doesn't really look like he's got a boss of any sort. So do you think that party members backed the wrong horse in Kemi Badenoch?
No, I don't, is the simple answer to that question. But on Robert is doing what shadow cabinet ministers should be doing, and attacking the issues head on. All of the shadow cabinet are. Robert obviously has a slightly different profile to many, simply because he's just been a contender in the leadership, and everybody's watching, thinking there's something nefarious in these actions. But Robert is doing exactly what Robert should be doing, and taking the fight to the opposition, accounting for our failures over 14 years, but also extolling our successes over the last 14 years as well. It was our 14 years in government was far from something to be despondent about. There were elements that we got wrong, and elements that led to our defeat in July. But shadow ministers, of course, are able to go off their own brief slightly as well and comment on other issues of the day, which is something that we can't see from ministers in government. So I think what we see from all the shadow cabinet, including Robert, is exactly what they should be doing. I think we've really stepped up our game in recent weeks in taking that fight to Labour. I mean, obviously they're making it a bit easier for us than it otherwise might have been if we were, 1997, for example. But I think that Robert's doing exactly what Robert should be doing, and long may he continue.
Do you think there might be more defections? I mean, could Robert Jenrick or Suella Braverman cross the floor and join Reform UK, metaphorically and literally?
Oh, well, I would like to think not. I'll never say never in this game, but I would certainly like to think not. The defections that we've seen to Reform, and I say defections in inverted commas, are former politicians, former councillors in a lot of cases. People have already been disaffected.
Lee Anderson did it whilst serving Tory MP,
well,
don't forget.
No, he didn't. He had lost the whip, if you remember,
that's true.
and hadn't been given it back. So that that disaffection was there. Now, likely, don't get me wrong. I wanted us to do something to bring him back into the fold, but yeah. So I don't. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. I wouldn't like to start trying to predict the future, but I would like to think not, particularly as Reform do tack leftwards with their policies.
There you go. Well, look, before I let you go, Mark, Reform UK obviously are the elephant in the room, certainly for the Conservatives, but you're right to say for Labour as well. Is some kind of deal between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage before the election inevitable?
That's way above my pay grade.
If you were the leader of the Conservative Party, would you be working hard to have a relationship with Nigel Farage in the event that you need his support?
I think there should definitely be a relationship. You can never predict the outcome of an election, as much as we try. There has to be a good working relationship. We have to think that Reform might prefer to work with Conservatives than Labour. That's certainly the starting point that I would like to start from. But I also, when we talk about deals, I take an old-fashioned view, if I'm honest, that everybody should be given the chance to vote Conservative, and that we have to win on our merits, and that for us means dealing with the disaffection and the broken promises and the way we've conducted ourselves in government with the changes of Prime Minister, for example, regular changes of prime ministers it unfortunately became. So I think, there's some atonement to do. We've got to deal with that disaffection. We've got to show that we've got policies that work for the country, that don't include, for example, wholesale nationalisation of industry.
I mean, absolutely. I've got so many viewers and listeners who are former Labour and Conservative supporters who love reform because they feel that reform represents change. They think the Tories had 14 years in office to save this country but made it much worse. You're calling Nigel Farage a neo-socialist. I mean, this is an example of the Conservatives in total denial about the threat that faces them, isn't it?
No, look, I lost my seat by fewer votes than Reform took. Now we can argue about whether that means I lost my seat because of Reform, but that is the fact. I lost my seat because of few.
I mean, if there was no Nigel Farage, you are now a sitting Conservative MP, aren't you?
Possibly. Who knows? Who knows where those 7,500 Reform votes actually came from? How many didn't vote previously? How many voted Labour? There's only so much of that data that we can garner at a local level, and we're still processing that data now. The data that we collected over the election, for example. So I'm certainly not in denial, but we have to. The fact is that it is that feeling that many Reform voters feel that we didn't do what we should have done. We didn't do a great job of telling people what we were doing, if I'm honest, Mark. And this was something that I raised time and time again as a backbencher in the Whip's office. I continually raised the fact that we should be telling, and we often talked about what we'd done since 2019, for example, in Boris's government. Well, actually, we should have been talking about the steps we've taken since 2010, and we're doing more of that Absolutely. Now out of government than we did in government.
What a delight to have you on the Mark Dolan Show. Do come back and see us again soon because you're out of Parliament, so you can say exactly what you think, which you've just done. My thanks to former Conservative MP Mark Jenkinson.